Did Apollo 11 encounter UFOs on the moon? According to hitherto unconfirmed reports, both Neil Armstrong and Edwin Aldrin saw UFOs shortly after that historic landing on the moon in Apollo 11 on July 21, 1969. I remember hearing one of the astronauts refer to a light in or on a crater during the televised transmission, followed by a request from Mission Control for further information. Nothing more was heard. According to former NASA employee Otto Binder, unnamed radio hams with their own VHF receiving facilities that bypassed NASA's broadcasting outlets picked up the following exchange. Mission Control, what's there? Mission Control calling Apollo 11. Apollo 11, these babies are huge, sir, enormous. Oh, God, you wouldn't believe it. I'm telling you, there are other spacecraft out there, lined up on the far side of the crater edge. They are on the moon, watching us. The story has been relegated to the world of science fiction since it first appeared, but in 1979, Maurice Chatelain, former chief of NASA communications specialists and one of the scientists who conceived and designed the Apollo spacecraft, confirmed that Armstrong had indeed reported seeing two UFOs on the rim of a crater. The encounter was common knowledge in NASA, he revealed, but nobody has talked about it until now. Soviet scientists were allegedly the first to confirm the incident. According to our information, the encounter was reported immediately after the landing of the module, said Dr. Vladimir Azaza, a physicist and professor of mathematics at Moscow University. Neil Armstrong relayed the message to Mission Control that two large, mysterious objects were watching them after having landed near the moon module. But his message was never heard by the public because NASA censored it. According to another Soviet scientist, Dr. Alexander Kazantsev, Buzz Aldrin took color movie film of the UFOs from inside the module and continued filming them after he and Armstrong went outside. Dr. Azaza claims that the UFOs departed just minutes after the astronauts came out onto the lunar surface. Maurice Chatelain also confirmed that Apollo 11's radio transmissions were interrupted on several occasions in order to hide the news from the public. NASA chief spokesman John McLeish denied that the agency censored any voice transmissions from Apollo 11, but admitted that a slight delay in transmission took place due simply to processing through electronic equipment. Before dismissing Chatelain's sensational claims, it is worth noting his impressive background in the aerospace industry and space program. His first job after moving from France was as an electronics engineer with Convair, specializing in telecommunications, telemetry, and radar. In 1959, he was in charge of an electromagnetic research group, developing new radar and telecommunications systems for Ryan. One of his 11 patents was an automatic radar landing system that ignited retro rockets at a given altitude, used in the Ranger and Surveyor flights to the moon. Later, at North American Aviation, Chatelain was offered the job of designing and building the Apollo communication and data processing system. In his book, Chatelain claims that all Apollo and Gemini flights were followed, both at a distance and sometimes also quite closely, by space vehicles of extraterrestrial origin, flying saucers, or UFOs, if you want to call them by that name. Every time it occurred, the astronauts informed Mission Control, who then ordered absolute silence. He goes on to say, I think that Walter Scheer aboard Mercury 8 was the first of the astronauts to use the code name Santa Claus to indicate the presence of flying saucers next to space capsules. However, his announcements were barely noticed by the general public. It was a little different when James Lovell, on board the Apollo 8 command module, came out from behind the moon and said for everybody to hear, please be informed that there is a Santa Claus, even though this happened on Christmas Day, 1968. Many people sensed a hidden meaning in those words. Dr. Paul Lohman of NASA's Goddard Space Flight Center advised most of the radio communications from the Apollo crew on the surface were relayed in real time to Earth. I am continually amazed by people who claimed that we have concealed the discovery of extraterrestrial activity on the moon. The confirmed detection of extraterrestrial life, even if only by radio, will be the greatest scientific discovery of all time, and I speak without exaggeration. The idea that a civilian agency such as NASA, operating in the glare of publicity, could hide such a discovery is absurd. Even if it wanted to, one would have to swear to secrecy not only the dozen astronauts who landed on the moon, but also the hundreds of engineers, technicians, and secretaries directly involved in the missions and the communication links. Yet the rumors persist. NASA may well be a civilian agency, but many of its programs are funded by the defense budget, as has been pointed out, and most of the astronauts are subject to military security regulations. Apart from the fact that the National Security Agency screens all films, and probably radio communications as well, we have the statements by Otto Binder, Dr. Gary Henderson, and Maurice Chatelain, that the astronauts were under strict orders not to discuss their sightings. And Gordon Cooper has testified to a UN committee that one of the astronauts actually witnessed a UFO on the ground. If there is no secrecy, why has this sighting not been made public? Not all communications between the astronauts and ground control are public, as NASA itself admits. John McLeish, Chief of Public Information at the Manned Spacecraft Center, now Lyndon B. Johnson Space Center in Houston, explained to Timothy Good in 1970 that although there is no separate radio frequency used by the astronauts for private conversations with mission control, private conversations, usually to discuss medical problems, are rerouted when the astronauts request a private conversation or when a private conversation is deemed necessary by officials on the ground. It is transmitted on the same S-band radio frequencies as are normally used, but it is routed through different audio circuits on the ground. And unlike other air-to-ground conversations with the spacecraft, it is not released to the general public. But is there any truth to the Apollo 11 story? A friend of Timothy Good, who formerly served in a branch of British military intelligence, has provided Timothy Good with unexpected corroboration. Timothy Good did not reveal the name of his source, nor the location and date of the following conversation that was overheard and subsequently confirmed by another friend, which will inevitably lay him open to charges of fabricating the story or being the victim of a hoax. Yet the story must be told, however apocryphal. A certain professor, whose name is known to Timothy Good, was engaged in an earnest discussion with Neil Armstrong during a NASA symposium, and according to his friend's recollection, part of the conversation went as follows. "Professor, what really happened out there with Apollo 11? Armstrong, it was incredible. Of course, we had always known there was a possibility. The fact is, we were warned off. There was never any question then of a space station or a moon city." "Professor, how do you mean, warned off?" "Armstrong, I can't go into details, except to say that their ships were far superior to ours, both in size and technology. Boy, were they big and menacing. No, there is no question of the space station." "Professor, but NASA had other missions after Apollo 11. Armstrong, naturally, NASA was committed at that time and couldn't risk a panic on Earth. But it really was a quick scoop and back again." Later, when Timothy Good's friend confronted Armstrong, the latter confirmed that the story was true, but refused to go into further detail, beyond admitting that the CIA was behind the cover-up. What does Neil Armstrong have to say about the matter, officially? In reply to Timothy Good's inquiry, he simply stated, "Your reliable sources are unreliable. There were no objects reported, found, or seen on Apollo 11 or any other Apollo flight, other than of natural origin. All observations on all Apollo flights were fully reported to the public." Resources above top secret, Timothy Good, 1988. My take, there have been enough leaks about this story to make me believe that something interesting happened. I also think that the dark side of the moon is where the aliens are hiding. It's close to us, and we cannot easily see them from here.
don't forget to sign up for our Patreon page. Members get early access to videos, ad-free, and you can see content you can't see anywhere else.